All right, it's now 2 o'clock, so I think we'll get going. So good afternoon, everyone who's joined. Thank you so much for joining us for this HMRC Technology Sourcing Programme Market Engagement event brought to you by us at Tech UK. My name is Henry Rex. I'm the Associate Director for Government and Health at Tech UK. We are the trade association for digital and tech companies operating in the UK, and delighted to be working with HMRC this afternoon on this engagement event. You'll all know why we're here. The Technology Sourcing Programme is, I think, one of the biggest strategic tech spends in government, and it's great to see HMRC engaging with the supplier base at this early stage to communicate their vision and ambition for the programme, and to start to inform industry about what they want to do, and also listen to industry's feedback for views on the programme. As you can see from the slide, I'll just, after the quick intro and a bit of housekeeping, I'll then hand over to Daljit, the very new CDIO from HMRC, and thank you for joining us for this event so early into your tenure. He'll then hand over to Rolf, who'll take up the Programme Director, who'll take us through in a bit more detail the overview of the programme before handing over to Anthony to talk us through a bit of the strategy, and then Nisar will cover off the commercial approach and pipeline. But before we do that, I would just like to cover off a little bit of housekeeping. The first thing for you all to note is that we are recording this session, so please do just bear that in mind, and we will share the recording via HMRC for those who would like to revisit it later. There won't be any Q&A as part of this event, so I think given the number of people joining, that just felt a bit ambitious, but there will be opportunities for you as suppliers to provide initial comments and feedback in real time, as we say, during the event, so please do use the Q&A function to record your initial reflections, responses, reactions, thoughts, impressions as we go through the presentation today. We're really keen to hear industry's views, so please do share, jot down any thoughts you think will be of interest to share with the HMRC team. It should be very easy for you to use, and do please bear in mind that your comments will not be made available for all to see. If for any reason you're struggling to use the Q&A function on Teams, you can just drop me an email at henry.rex@techuk.org, and I will make a note of your comments and pass them through to HMRC as well. Finally, following the event, a digital handout containing all the critical information that you're going to hear this afternoon will be sent to all attendees, so no need to jot things down too vigorously as we go. In case you might miss anything, we will be sharing a digital handout, as I say, with all that critical information. And with that, I'm delighted to welcome Daljit Rahal, the new CDIO from HMRC, who'll introduce HMRC and talk a little bit about the Technology Sourcing Programme. If we can do a quick sound check. Daljit, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. And I can hear you. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Over to you.
I've got on video now, so I hope you can see me. Well, I'll start off by saying welcome. Thank you for taking your time to join us today. And really sort of want to set the scene with a few messages from me to kick this off. I want to start by just saying, it's not often that somebody in my position will say to an audience like you that I represent every one of you on my system somehow, and beyond you, your communities, your friends, your family, your, people you trade with, somehow the totality of everybody in the country is somehow represented on the HMRC systems. We serve 50 million customers and support about 60,000 internal employees, and we handle around 2 billion plus transactions per year. Just to give you some further figures to sort of highlight that, in the year 2018 to 19, we collected about 628 billion pounds of revenue, approximately, and on top of that, another further 34 billion pound additional tax was generated through our compliancy activities. We are, UK's one of UK's most digital organisations. We've reached about 94%, a record of 10.4 million out of 2020 income tax self-assessments are returned online. We got 50% income tax credit renewals happening online, and about 25 million plus systems using their online personal tax account. Our contact centres process about 500 million calls to our tax APIs so far just this year. And in terms of what we've done in other digital areas, we've got 100 plus robotic automations already implemented, with about 35 million transactions processed to date. We have an app, we have a mobile app, and about 500,000 people use that app up to 4 million times per month. So, the size, the complexity, and the breadth of what we do, all sort of, represented by those numbers, is just part of the whole thing. Some recent successes we've had is the mobilisation on Chancellor's schemes for the COVID-19 schemes, and the way we launched those. We successfully delivered them, scheduled them, mobilised our teams, and met the anticipated demand levels, achieved customer satisfaction ratings around about in the 90s. So something that we've demonstrated that we have been able to do. On the digital agenda, we are far advanced in our digital journey. And, we've got a lot more to do still, but just to give you a flavour of some of those numbers in my intro, that we have come a long way as a probably something that was started in the ancient times, or definitely in the in sort of Middle Ages. I'm moving on to, can somebody move? I don't know if you can see my slides. Just moving on to my next slide. So, of course, all of this is underpinned by, you can imagine, a very complex IT estate. With one of the largest data repositories on there, with up to 800 terabytes of data, 600 systems, of which roughly half are virtualized. It's a 24/7 operation, and we do a change agenda with around about 1,000 IT changes every month. So, we've come a long way on this journey. In the last 5 years, we've ended up launching sort of, multi-channel digital tax platforms, hosting more than 130 digital services, and it's been award-winning and well recognised by even the private sector, trying to sort of look at GDS and the way it's worked with us in HMRC in trying to create a more digital kind of channel there for the customers. We're also now at the forefront of adopting, cloud technology at scale, with resiliency and flexibility that we need for the future. We're early adopter of that. We're in the process of rolling that out, and we've achieved so much in the last decade that we've simply got to the point that we're now starting to address some of our legacy estate to modernize it and build more agility into that. So carried forward quite a bit of technical debt, which we're in the process of now remediating. So that's the overall kind of landscape in terms of the technology, the size of it, the complexity of it, and some of the successes, especially around the digital channel that we're enjoying. If I just move on to my next slide, I don't know if you can see my whoever's moving these slides. Can you? I'm on slide 4 now. So really, what we call taxpayers and people who deal with customers, and we all know in this audience, customers have expectations. Their expectations are set by the world. They're set by the digital advances that others are making, and not just us. So it's a constantly moving expectation that we have to keep up with. We can't afford to stand still. We have to solve, business problems faster, using more agile ways with every ounce of technology we can get hold of, and to use the latest innovation and the great ideas that will help us to work more efficiently, improve our experience for customers, and be the best at doing what we do. One of the things we are keen on is, we think small players have as much of a role to play as some of the big suppliers. So we are looking for a whole spectrum of partners that will work with us to take us forward as we move on to the next chapter of modernizing and becoming a more holistic digital platform for this country. And moving to the next slide is that just want to touch on, because of what we do and because of what I said at the start, we represent just about everybody. Everybody in this audience is on our systems. We want to represent and do the job the best way we can. We want to offer this as a unique opportunity that only we can offer for partners to get involved with us, to create an environment in which we're continuously improving and taking on some of those outcome-driven, agile, digital concepts and living with them. We want to use the best, latest technology and bring it into government and show the way. We want to be able to do it at scale. We are not afraid to innovate, and we want to innovate. So we're looking for partners. We're looking for you as an audience that will help us to co-create solutions that are fit for the future, not just for today. And also using your kind of greater technical intellect to help us solve some problems which have been very hard to solve for a government civil service agency like ours. So, it's all about, drive continuous improvement, improve our customer service, using technology at scale, co-creating with our partners, and not be afraid to innovate and bring the latest technology into our modernization agenda. So it's a unique opportunity for you, the audience, to get involved with somebody like us, because we believe we are unique in that, and by doing so together, the journey can be very exciting for all of you and us and whoever gets involved with us going forward in this journey. So I just wanted to say you're going to hear a lot more about the whole program for the rest of this session, and I've kind of just done my opening piece here, and I want to now leave you to enjoy what follows through the rest of this session. So thank you very much. I'll leave you to now Rolf Botha, who will take over, who's our Technology Sourcing Program Director. He will discuss with you our vision, ambition, and challenges going forward. So thank you for taking the time. I look forward to seeing you all again. In the meantime, I'll hand you off to Rolf.
Thank you, Daljit. Good afternoon. I take it you can all hear us. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm Rolf Botha. I'm the Program Director, as Daljit indicated to you. I've been involved with the program now for the last 18 months in planning it to the stage where we are now, and we are very excited to meet with you all this afternoon. Appreciate your attendance. Just a bit of context for the rest of the afternoon. I will take you through the program background, scope, and what we are setting out to address just now. Then I'll hand over to Anthony Collard, who's the Director for Strategy, Design, Architecture and Innovation. We'll provide you an overview of our IT strategy and highlight the focus areas going forward. And then after that, Nisa Yaya, the IT Commercial Director, will provide you with some feedback with our from our early market engagement, and then give you an overview of the procurement process and pipelines, including the Group 1 procurements that we've already kicked off, and we'll go to market very shortly. That's in essence the agenda for the afternoon. Would you mind to go to the next slide, please? So, what's a technology sourcing program about? Well, it's a multi-year program over 5 years that's effectively split into two to enable the transformation and enablement of how we as HMRC CDIO deliver IT, how we utilize technology, and then also how we work more effectively together as an organization. By 2022, HMRC will start to migrate to a new vendor landscape in a phased approach. So that will then enable us to regularly recompete contracts as we go forward, create more disaggregation across our entire landscape, and work with many more suppliers, as Daljit said, including SMEs. And this will mean that as we carry on, there will be a transition of suppliers, services, contracts, and people on an ongoing basis. This program will enable us to ensure that we've got a future modern IT estate for HMRC. So next on, if we go to the next slide, please. I would like to play you a short video that gives you a very, very quick overview in terms of the technology sourcing program. I recommend that you turn your volume up a little bit. Can you please play the video?
Technology sourcing is a multi-year program to transform how HMRC delivers IT and works with suppliers so that we can collaborate as a single team, create value for money, and offer our customers the latest technology. So why are we doing this now, and what will it involve? CDIO's vision is to run a secure, flexible, and modern IT estate that enables innovation to meet changing policy needs and evolving customer expectations. Given all that is happening in the world, HMRC needs us more than ever to be agile, flexible, and responsive. Recently, we have seen how responsive we can be when we work together as one team, partnering with suppliers, HMRC's policy and operational teams to build, test, and deploy our COVID response platforms in a matter of weeks from the Chancellor's announcement. One of the things that makes it harder to work as a single team is the way our contracts are set up. That's part of what Technology Sourcing Programme is here to change. So how did we get here? Why does it take such a long time to make changes to our technology and to adapt to the technical innovations we see around us? Well, in the past, we, like everyone else, tended to think about technology in terms of lists of everything we would ever need to do. We then built huge systems that would meet those requirements. These often got built in isolation and became like black boxes that you had to be an insider to understand. Black boxes proliferated and the interdependencies between them became highly complex, making change even harder. We have accrued a lot of technical debt. Some of these systems date back to the 1970s. At the time, the norm in the industry was to manage this complexity through outsourcing. We began doing this at scale in 1994, paving the way for the single 2004 mega contract Aspire. So how is this technology sourcing program going to help? Well, imagine each black box is made up of a collection of capabilities. A capability is where we have all the right people, processes, technology, and standards to get something done. Many of the capabilities exist in the organisation today. We just don't have a shared way of talking about them across teams. Identifying and building a model around these capabilities is at the heart of our IT strategy. As we move our systems from data centres to the cloud through the Securing Our Technical Future programme, it will become easier to see and talk about which capabilities each of our systems is built out of. With this shared model, we can start to break down the boundaries between systems and move towards a more agile, data-centric architecture. However, none of this will be possible if our contracts are not aligned to how we deliver our IT and to support blocks of functionality. The objective of the Technology Sourcing Programme is to move our supplier frameworks to the new, capability-led way of doing things over the next 5 years. This task is made urgent by the fact that HMRC's 5 major IT contracts, covering around 75% of our annual spend, will be expiring in June 2022. This is both a challenge and an opportunity. To make the change, the programme has developed a target supply chain model to define what the units of capability are, how they fit together across CDIO, how they compare to our current contracts, and how we will procure them using common standards, measures and service level agreements. While we expect to generate efficiencies through the retendering process, the main driver for the programme is not just modern contracts, but enabling a more agile future in an uncertain world, where we can respond fluidly as a single team, access the latest technology, bring past agile initiatives to fruition, and offer ongoing value for money.
Excellent, thank you. I hope you've been able to follow that and that the audio was okay. Can we move to the next slide, please? All right. Okay, so let's start unpicking what the technology sourcing program is about a little bit more. So as you're aware up to now that HMRC is one of the few hyperscale enterprise IT environments within the government. So in summary, what will the technology sourcing program deliver? So first of all, by 2022, our contracts expire, and therefore we need to move to new contracts. Some of the bases of our contracts are running since 1994, and we need to get out of our current contracts onto new contracts, which is significantly different from what we've done before. As we get out of our old contracts onto new contracts, it will also enable us to address our technical debt and cyber interventions that is urgent for us to address going forward. At the same time, we will invest in our CDIO capability uplift, whereby we will establish new enterprise level standards, skills, process frameworks, and tools and automation to support the services that we deliver to the wider HMRC, but also to our clients. This will help us to also establish very clear definition in terms of roles and responsibility for HMRC and the industry, and also highlight how we work together in true partnership going forward. Part of this will also then mean that we need to address our delivery classification boundaries subject to consultation. So there are a couple of things that you can see on your screen from point 1 to 8 on the screen here. 75% of our contracts are expiring in June 2022, which is not ideal. However, in point 8, we're saying that as part of the scope of this program, we are addressing the entire IT spend based on our baseline for 18-19. In terms of how we go about delivering IT going forward. As Daljit indicated, and as you've seen from the video, the way that we are currently structured from a technology point of view means that the making of changes is too costly and takes too long, and therefore we need to create a new environment whereby HMRC can drive access and implement innovative technologies across the board in order to make sure that we continue to strive to be the #1 tax authority in the world. So there's a lot to do over the next 5 years, and we have adopted a very specific hybrid programmatic approach towards this. We've got very specific deadlines, but there is a lot of work that we need to conduct as we go along in order to make sure that we deliver on time. Can we go to the next slide, please? So in terms of the scope of TSP, or the Technology Sourcing Program, it is essentially split into 2 halves over 5 years. The first part is addressing the immediate need in terms of our expiring contracts. The second part is basically to make sure that we've got a evolving long-term environment whereby we have more flexibility in terms of how we operate. As I said before, this program is an enabling program in order to drive further transformation across the entire organization. So a number of things that we're doing. So one is we have defined now our future technology strategy target supply chain model. that includes our supply chain and our functional model in terms of how we want to operate going forward. We are in the process of finalizing our in-source outsource boundaries and the impact that that's got on the entire organization in terms of delivering IT. Then we will go through on to regularly compete and award and implement industry-leading IT contracts so that we address the history that's been building up since 1994. Simultaneously, as I said, we'll uplift our capabilities, but at the same time, we need to stand up and protect our live services. As Daljit indicated earlier, we support in the region of £600 billion of tax revenue on an annual basis. And therefore, this is an environment whereby we need to make sure that as we move our contracts from the old to the new, that live services are very much protected. And therefore, it is not just a very, very small program that we need to run. Alongside of all the procurements that we're doing from now until 2025, there are also major transformation programs running in parallel. There's the EU transition, making tax digital for business, plus the various COVID schemes that's running in parallel. And then there's other initiatives in wider government as well. So we've got a significant number of critical interdependencies that we need to be very much aware of, that needs to be taken in consideration as we go forward. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is my final slide. So in terms of redefining our delivery classification, we have designed a target supply chain model and assessed the maturity against our future state where we want to arrive in 2025. We've got a roadmap in terms of how to get to that level of maturity with the pivot point for 2022, mid-2022. And over the next 5 years, we will slowly migrate to a more mature environment. Apologies, I saw my video just cut out. To a more mature environment, whereby we will implement our target supply chain model and go to market in order to procure the various elements of this model as we strive to work in partnership with the industry as one team to deliver IT for HMRC going forward. With that, it's the end of my slides. I will now hand over to Anthony Collard to take you through his part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rolf. Hopefully people can see me in high definition. My name is Anthony Collard. I'm Director of Strategy, Design, Architecture and Innovation for CDIO. And before that, I was Director of Digital Transformation, and so I've created our digital capabilities that others have already talked about here today. I'm going to give you a bit of a run through about our tech strategy and touch on our data strategy and where we're trying to get to, and TSP is a core part of what we want to do to enable us to get there. And I think you'll see it's a fairly complex picture. We have a very clear vision about what we'd like to look like, but actually where we are now and where we're starting from is probably not the world's most ideal IT landscape. Can we have the next slide, please, Adnan? The first thing to talk about really then is the context, and some of this has already been covered. So Rolf's given you the background of why we're doing the technology sourcing program, and Daljit's given you an overview of who we are and what we do. In my team, through my innovation team and through my enterprise architects and strategists, we're also looking at where the UK is likely to go in terms of some of the trends that we're seeing, both in terms of technology and data, but also in terms of customer expectation and what other fiscs or tax regimes are doing around the world. And these are some of the mega trends that we've kind of come up with and what we are looking at and what we're thinking we're going to have to intersect. And we're already doing some proof of concept work around this, things like blockchain, distributed ledger technology in the import-export world, doing work with small fintech companies around that. We're also working with the Open Banking Institute around how we might be able to exploit open banking more. But we're starting to think about what tax means and benefits mean for Gen Z, and some of the ways in which, post-EU exit, post-COVID, this world is likely to change. And where we want to take our IT is less a thing that has to react to something that's already happened, and more sort of creating an IT framework that enables us to intercept that rather seamlessly. We were very lucky in terms of the COVID schemes because we already have some front-facing platform services that allow us to deliver really quick digital services very, very quickly. But actually, as you dig underneath the rest of the estate, you'll see it's a bit of a spaghetti western in terms of the architecture. Next slide, please, Adnan. So I apologise for this very strange looking drawing. It is a little bit like Star Wars 1981 for the young ones on the call. We've used this slide with a number of our internal stakeholders to try and explain where we want to get to. I'll go into the wording that you can see on the right hand side in more detail on a different slide. You better read that a lot easier than this. But the principle here is kind of that piece of a pizza aiming into the earth. It's about moving away from 600 systems that have all been created over a period of 20 or 30 or even 40 years in some cases, and have been an amalgamation of at least 3 large organizations over 20 years, and try and come into a platform-centric approach with fewer platforms accounting for more of those systems. But then in terms of a degree of governance and design in how we build our services, on previous sessions you've heard about black boxes, and we have lots of those, and each of those black boxes holds its own data, does its own calculations, has its own business rules embedded within it, might even have its own workflow within it, and we have sort of dozens of those, of which our own internal staff and our customers have to kind of navigate. We don't have that joined up landscape where I exist both as a taxpayer, as maybe a tax credit claimant, as a child benefit claimant, as a tax-free childcare recipient. These are all individual platforms, systems and services that do not join up. And where we want to get to is a place where they do, and when they do, where they're governed correctly. So you can see some very complex IT words, hard and soft. And that's really about the governance around the different layers of IT. Let's just talk very quickly through some of those. Now, in the light blue layer, that's where we, at the bottom, where we've got the word hard, that's about our data, our debt book, our financial transactions, things that we would want to control fairly rigidly about what goes into them, and what data we accept as valid, and what makes up that customer record. Striving for that master customer record, and that data is then left there but used by various other platforms, either to give us a degree of analytics, so we have an analytics platform that is able to look at that data and maybe identify compliance risks, or maybe give us an input as to how a policy might play out if we looking at the nature of the customers that we serve. Going right up to the top, where we have an interaction and exchange layer that is a loosely coupled microservice platform that enables us to deliver very, very quickly. And you'll have seen through COVID that we've already got some of those components in place, all underpinned by that purple layer at the bottom, which is cloud, cloud native, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, DevSecOps, and all the usual words that you'd have heard through technology conversations that you've had with many, many people. We're partly the way along that journey, but not systemically. With 600 different systems, we're in a different state of repair. Do you want to do the next slide, please, Adnan? Let's try and bring some of those characteristics for some of those different platform sort of layers together, some of which we've touched on. So if we touch on the light blue one again, first of all, a common accredited finance process and immutable financial records. Now, we do have very strong financial records, but it is a little bit of Excel spreadsheet, a little bit of data over here and data over there, all being joined in a very clear way. But we need to bring it all together into one place. We need to master it, and we need to make sure that it can't be touched by anybody else. Now, I said earlier on that we have a spaghetti western landscape, and we do. We have business processes wrapped into some of our systems that we need to unpick, and part of TSP is helping us get into that position where we have very clear systems using effectively off-the-shelf products as opposed to things that we've bespoke to within an inch of its life. Domain services is a new platform where we'll start to break out some of our black boxes and put some of our our business rules and business validation and logic into that system. And then we have a sort of a case flow and case management piece in intervention. We're able to take cases and work them across the organisation, as opposed to what we have now is sort of 6 or 7 different case systems, depending upon the part of the organisation that you work within. There's some common kind of components, but we are not near here yet. We have 1 or 2 world-class IT platforms. We have 1 or 2 very old platforms that we need to replace, and we also have an awful lot of change going on. So we are at the heart of the government's COVID response, and we're at the heart of the government's EU exit response, and we have to change this IT landscape in an iterative way. And so we need help, and that's part of what TSP is here to do, to help us to enable this to come to life. Do you want to go on to the next slide, please, Edna? Thanks. This is, and it's not complete, this is just an illustrative view of some of those capabilities that we would see sitting on our various layers, what we would consider to be as part of that. So if you took at the top layer, where we have something called our multi-channel digital tax platform, that already hosts our identity service, of which some of you would have used, Government Gateway it's called. We took it over from DWP and Atos 2 or 3 years ago, and we're in the middle of converting that into a modern identity exchange platform and working across government to bring that to life. We already have 2 tax accounts, the personal tax account and the business tax account, which is a microservice that sits upon it, and you may have already interacted with that. And 22 million people already use their personal tax account, and that's increasing on a daily basis. We already have a single payment window for online, but we want that to be a payment window that people can do through telephony and other ways of making those payments. So we have a platform that has very simple, lightweight microservices that pulls data from our tax accounting and customer area in order to serve the customer, or in order to receive data from outside and do what we need to do with it. Finally, the last slide, please, if you wouldn't mind. Thanks. The key part of our IT strategy is really to enable data. We're a data organisation. We have terabytes and terabytes of it. And in the future, data is going to be the key thing that enables us to do the job that we need to do. Even a transaction for VAT is simply a matter of data being executed and working out who the right amount of VAT for that and passing it to the right places is all about data. And the infrastructure is there to support that. We are in the process of putting in much better standards around data. So whilst we've had data standards for many, many years, actually it's never been mandated across government, and we need to do that now. And that's part of the challenge that we've got as a government, and we're at the forefront of trying to do that for HMRC. We'll master it in the right place, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have one big data lake. We might have a series of data puddles. We're quite open-minded, and I think the key point that Daljit referred to earlier on is about innovation. We want partners to come to us and with us and bring their own innovation into whatever contract they win or whatever they work on, to try and help us shape where we want to go. We want to govern our data design and process end to end. We, in the past, have been an outsourced organisation for 20 years, since about 1994. And now what we're trying to do is bring IT consultancy with a degree of ownership. And I've been in this department for about 28 years to sit there and say, actually, the right way of doing things is this way, and start to stop some of the bad habits that have crept in over the past, where perhaps we've been very holistically business led in terms of the technology and data choices we make, as opposed to the outcomes that we want to achieve from our policies. And finally, we need to be doing things around GDPR. We need to be doing things about accessibility. We need to be things about making sure that the data that we get in from our external partners is robust, meets our standards, and we don't stick it in the wrong place. So our 2 strategies around data and IT are very much about cleaning up what we've got, the legacy that we have inherited over 20 or 30 years, taking our future platforms forward, building on our very modern and responsive MDTP platform that during the peak of some of the COVID schemes was coping with sort of 4 million customers over 2 days coming in to claim money from the self-employment income support scheme, and making sure that all of our systems can interact with something like that at the pace at which that was able to do it. So I think that's come to me. I think there's a Q&A, and I'm happy to take questions. I could spend 2 hours doing this, but I'll now pass over to Nisa, who's going to talk about the commercial approach and the pipeline.
Thank you, Anthony. Hopefully you can see and hear me, but somebody ping me and tell me if you can't. So I'm Nisar Yahya. I'm the Interim Commercial Director for HMRC's Technology Spend. So following on from that canter through our technology strategy, I'm going to talk a little bit about our commercial approach, how we're engaging or intending to engage supply markets, what we've heard from you so far, our commercial strategy, and I'll introduce our procurement pipeline and what you're going to be seeing in the market very soon. I think one of the really fundamentals of our approach, I just have to say, is we do want to be out of the supply market. We want to be out in the supply market often, and we want to be hearing what you have to say and learning so that it informs our approach. We don't have all the answers within the organisation. So we've designed a three-stage approach essentially. So at stage one, we sought to test and refine our approach to TSP. So back in June, we convened a group of about 20 suppliers, incumbents and challengers, large and small, through Tech UK again, where we put our approach to them, and then in breakouts had a number of Q&A sessions. Thanks for moving the slide across. That was very positively received, and I'll talk a little bit about what we learnt in the next slide in a moment. Stage two of that is today, so this is about taking our plans to you, the market, introducing us, what we've been doing, our technology strategy, and then what's coming up next. And then in stage three, what we'll do is run a series of smaller events, which will be much more targeted at specific spend categories or logical delivery clusters. There'll be two-way conversations where one of the objectives will be for us to get help to refine our requirements before we go to the market in the future. So if I just move to the next slide. At our stage one event, so back in June, we ran an event where we spoke to, as I said, a number of suppliers, 20 or so suppliers, and we asked them some questions. We presented our approach, we tested how that was. We asked some questions about how to make sure that we were attracting as many suppliers as possible. We inquired about the health of supply markets, and we listened to what it was about our procurement processes that we could do differently to make them more effective. And in summary, and I won't go through all of this here, but what we learnt was pretty much our approach is consistent with other government departments. So the disaggregation agenda, for example, but we need to be prepared to flex it. Things will change, that's inevitable. We learned that early engagement with you through the supply market is absolutely critical. We need to be communicating clearly, and also we need to make sure that we don't underestimate the time it takes to do things, the time it takes to run procurement events and to transition to potential new supply solutions. On making what we're doing more inclusive, we heard that we need to work hard to bring in particularly smaller suppliers into our supply chain. And that includes looking at our procurement practices from beginning to end. That was really clear. And the other thing that we heard was from a supply market health point of view, supply markets are holding up quite well, and that there was already quite a lot of interest in what HMRC's requirements were and what we would be bringing to the market, because it was felt that that would potentially offer a fillip to the UK tech sector, so very welcome. So all of that went into helping us to define our commercial strategies. If we go to the next slide. So there are a number of facets of the commercial strategy that I want to just talk about. Three areas I'll talk about here, in fact. So firstly, our strategy is to deliver services with a significantly wider supply base. We have quite a significant concentration of spend at the moment, and we want to open that up. So we're going to work hard to attract new suppliers into that supply base. We'll be out in the market more often. We'll be as open as we possibly can. We'll share our plans so that you know what we're about and what we're doing. We're looking at the services which can be competed more easily, and we're planning to go to the market for those as soon as possible so that we have enough time to move from the current to the new supply chain. We're going to avoid exclusivity and minimum spend commitments as far as possible, and we're going to be hopefully more intelligent about the volumes that we take to the market and how we contract for those as well. Secondly, having made ourselves attractive to the supply market, we want to make sure that all vendors have the same chance to win work from us. So we want to level the playing field. Some of the things that we'll do in this area be around buying outcomes as opposed to being very specific about particular technical solutions. We're looking for, where we do have to look for particular technical solutions, what we do want is for industry standardized services rather than services that are customized for HMRC. Wherever possible, we look to transform the current services that we've got so that they are standardized, so that we can compete them prior to 2022. Now, whilst all of our contracts allow us to compete prior to 2022, we don't necessarily have the time to be able to transform all of our services. So whilst we'll address everything, some of that transformation will happen after 2022. Having achieved a level of standardization, we want to be able to buy on a modular basis. So more plug and play, less lock-in. Our specifications will need to be vendor agnostic. And as I said before, we'll share information with all vendors, hopefully in a consistent manner. And to do that, we'll establish things, data or clean rooms so that we control access to suppliers. Thirdly, we want to make it easier for you to do business with us. So some of the things that we'll do here are, for example, looking to apply risk-based approaches to the procurement processes that we run. So rather than doggedly running processes as we may have done sometimes in the past, we'll look to design processes that are commensurate with size and complexity of the spend that we're taking to the market. From a contract point of view, we'll use model contracts but modify them appropriately. From a pricing or pricing models point of view, I think it's fair to say that we would like to be in a position where we're buying more on an outcome basis. However, to get from where we are today to more outcome-based contracts, we're not going to be able to do in one single leap. So what we're going to do is introduce a spectrum of commercial pricing models so that we've got the ability to choose the right ones for the right procurements, and that allow us to flexibly balance the transfer of risk against cost. Another thing that we'll look at is contract terms. We want to have the right length of contract terms so that they're attractive to vendors, so that we can get the right value for money, but also retain some sort of flexibility in terms of the final terms. We'll use Crown Commercial Services frameworks where we can. We'll use Ariba and other tools, particularly in this COVID era that becomes even more important to make sure that we can do things online. We'll issue PIN notices, so all of the procurements that have yet to come out, you will see notices issued through the usual channels, but that's to ensure that everyone's cited on what's coming up. And then finally, our contract management processes are going to have to be a lot more rigorous and comprehensive and covering the bigger supply base that we expect to have. So if I just go to the next slide and talk a little bit about what the procurement roadmap actually looks like. So we've mentioned the June 2022 date a few times, and we need to be off our current contracts or the Aspire contracts by then. What I'd say is, and I mentioned this before, we'll definitely address all of the contracts by then, but some of the services that we buy may actually look similar to what they look like now, and the transformation journey continues beyond June 22 to 25 onwards. By transformation, I'm talking about internal capabilities as well as supply chain. But if I talk about supply chain for a moment, we've devised a series of waves of sourcing. We're calling them groups, so G1, G2, G3, and so on. And we've prioritized spend categories within those groups based on the reliance on internal capability uplift, risk to life services, size and complexity, the benefits, technical debt and cybersecurity drivers, how long we need for transitions, and also exclusivity with incumbents. So you can see here that G1 started earlier this year, scoping business case, exit planning, then goes on to specification or specifying requirements before we get to the actual procurement events. G2 and G3 follow. So that, as I said, by the middle of that page there, we'll have addressed all of our spend one way or another. And then after that, we get into G4, which is essentially going back to the beginning, sweeping up areas that haven't been fully transformed in the first wave, and then addressing around about 20% of the spend in each group thereafter. So if we go to the next slide, just to give you a bit of a snapshot of what the spend picture looks like. So you've had a few numbers being quoted at you today. So £930 million is the total number. That's the total spend that we have. That's internal and external cost at the moment. I'm sure you'll agree that it's pretty significant. In terms of how that's split up into the different groups, I'll talk about the groups actually in the next slide, but just a couple of things worth noting here. You'll see there's a G0. That means that we've already made a start. So we've run a competition for telephony services back end of last year, beginning of this year, and we've entered into some new agreements in the hosting area, as well as addressing some of the applications as well. If we go to the next slide, this is what you can expect very soon. So for the group 1 of procurements, I'll whiz through these. So we're building our digital delivery services and expect to be engaging with suppliers very, very soon, so in the next month or so. In the ETMP and EOPS area, so we recently ran an RFI to understand the availability and appetite of suppliers to support our legacy SAP environment. That may turn into a formal request for proposals in the near future. We're also conducting a short discovery project at the moment to help us define a strategy for our future ETMP and EOPS environment. In the networks area, we're currently devising our strategies for both the underlay and potentially an SD-WAN solution. And the current thinking is that we may conduct some early pre-procurement market engagement very, very soon with a formal procurement event towards February, March next year. That's the current status of that one. On data and analytics, watch this space for our warehouse support and data acquisition needs coming up in November. And then we've already kicked off the initial cyber tactical remediation program. There are 9 related projects. The first of these lots in the series are out this month, with the next coming about 6 months down the line. In the hosting area, as part of our Securing Our Technical Future program, we're planning some market engagement, a market engagement week, in fact, later this month. So there'll be a pin out about that very soon. And then test and release services will be released in January. Quite a lot happening this side of Christmas. So watch out for the pin notices that are coming out soon. And then if we just go to the next slide, very quick overview of what happens after G1, so G2 and beyond. So we've already started to think about constructing business cases and devising our go-to-market strategies in each of these areas, in the G2 areas at least. The focus does start to shift to applications with the next batches to be addressed. And then we've got cyber and data and analytics too. And then essentially in G3, it's everything else that we haven't already touched. So what you can see, there's a lot coming down the pipeline. We're going to be very open and transparent about when that comes to the market. We'll be issuing pin notices so that you'll have an opportunity, hopefully, to be able to get ahead of that pipeline. And well, we're very excited about all of that activity, and I hope that what you've heard today has whet your appetites as well, and that you will participate. I'm not sure how much time we've got left, but I think that's most of what I wanted to say. So thanks for listening. And I think, do I hand back to Henry now?
You do indeed. Thank you so much, Nisa. And thank you to all our speakers today, and indeed to everyone who came to join. First thing I'd like to say is people have been sending comments in via the Q&A function, but conscious that a lot of you will have just been on listening mode, so won't have had time yet. Please do send through your initial reflections, thoughts, impressions from the presentation through to me. You can reach me at henry.rex@techuk.org. I'll make sure that reaches the HMRC team, or for the next few minutes, do continue to use the Q&A chat function. As already promised, we will be issuing a digital handout after the event, which will cover all the critical information you've heard from the presentation already. And as I mentioned, the session was recorded as well. Finally, do continue to look out for further pre-procurement market engagement events for specific components and specific procurements from the technology sourcing programme as they emerge. I hope you found this afternoon useful. I certainly have. I think a really comprehensive and interesting presentation from our colleagues at HMRC, and I'd like to thank all the team there, obviously all our speakers today, so thank you to Daljet, Rolf, Anthony and Nisa, but also thank you to Adnan, Cormac and Rob for all their work behind the scenes, which has gone into making this happen. And finally, I'd like to thank you all for joining. As I say, I hope it's been a useful and informative session. I imagine you will have found it so. And I'd like to end with one final sort of call to action. I think it's always great to see government coming to engage with the industry like this. And we always like to encourage industry to reciprocate. So any thoughts, comments, do send them through when you can. And with that, thanks all for joining. Have a great Monday and rest of the week. Cheerio.